As the old saying goes, there is never a bad one-year contract. This offseason, there is plenty of players that are hitting free agency who are either coming off down years, maybe have injury histories that are concerns, or are veterans that will be looking to sign a one-year contract to either rebuild their value or to maximize on the value that they have to make as much money as possible during the 2023 season. Which of those free agents could fit the Mets next year? We'll discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor, and where I just wrote an article today titled Top MLB Free Agents Who Can Be Signed to a One-Year Deal. And I really broke this down into three different tiers because there was two players that I thought had very similar paths to free agency when it comes to being guys that, just really fell off as players over the last few years. There was two guys that I feel like represent the same upside and are playing for a big-time long-term deal next offseason. And then there was a group of veterans that I think will be spread around baseball and can all have a really big impact. But starting off with the two guys that are in a similar point in their career, guys that were teammates this past year when the Dodgers acquired Joey Gallo. You put Gallo and Bellinger together in this section of the article, and it's just guys that were once so promising. You look at 2017 through 2019, they combined between the two of them in 3 seasons to 214 home runs. The 2019 season, Cody Bellinger wins the MVP, hits 305, 406 on base, 629 slugging, 47 homers, at 161 WRC plus, which again measures hitters based on a league average of 100, so 61% better than your league average hitter. Gallo was coming off 2 prior seasons where he hit 40 plus homers. He was limited to 70 games, to just 70 games in 2019, but hit 22 homers, got on base at a 389 clip. So these were sluggers who you expected to go out, and they were getting on base at both of them a near 400 clip, hitting a ton of home runs, slugging at a great rate. These were some of the best young players in baseball. And then you add in the defense, and you thought when they hit free agency, they would be commanding 9-figure deals. Well, now we fast forward 3 years, and you have Bellinger, who was non-tendered because his arbitration salary just got too much for the Dodgers to afford. And, Gallo hits the market after a season where he hit 160, got on base at a sub-300 clip at 280, 357 slugging, and struck out nearly 40% of the time. They are both in this point in their careers where they could be the worst hitters in baseball next season. The two of them. That's how bad they could be. But they also represent this upside that teams are going to be salivating over on a one-year deal, because you're not going into signing a player who's either a veteran, like some of the guys we'll discuss later, or Mitch Haniger or Michael Conforto, who we'll talk about next, where you're just not sure if you're going to get them healthy. I mean, with Bellinger and Gallo, you feel pretty good about their health. They're coming off healthy seasons, and you at least know what they do bring to the table is the glove. And that's the thing when we discuss their fits with the Mets. And I know I've already spoken about Bellinger a bunch, and we're going to talk a little more about Conforto in the next segment. And I know I've spent time on that too, but what a Gallo or a Bellinger would do for the Mets is it would just solidify the defense, and it would give you offensive upside. So you would basically be looking at a contributor like Brandon Nimmo, who you'd be losing, who is constant offense, and you're losing a great at-bat in your lineup for guys that can hit the ball a mile if they connect, but have been consistently poor with their at-bats over the last couple of seasons. Yet, the glove is something that you appreciate. Now, Joey Gallo this past year, if you look at outs above average, not a good season for him across the board. In left field with the Yankees, -5 outs above average. But with the Dodgers, he was +2. You look at the 2021 campaign, in right field, he was 6 outs above average. In left field with the Yankees, he was -1. So is there still a good right fielder in Joey Gallo? He still ranks in the top 15% in both outfielder jump and in the top 10% in arm strength. The sprint speed's not great, but as long as he gets good jumps on the ball, if you have a Starling Marte playing center next to him, like defensively, it could work. Now, Joey Gallo, the hitter, has been pretty awful, but the one thing you can say is, all right, he still hits the ball hard, which actually his data on that is better than a Bellinger is. He still walked at an elite rate this year. I mean, as bad as you could say he was still in the 95th percentile when it comes to walk rate. And if you look at his career numbers there, he is able to time and again at least lay off bad pitches. Kind of what I've been talking about with Ronnie Mauricio, where if he can at least get his eye to a point where he's drawing the walks, he could be a really good player because the power can play up like a Joey Gallo, I believe. Gallo for his career, his walk rate's at 14.8%. This past season, it was at 13.7. The year before, when he posted a 122 WRC plus and he got on base at a 351 clip despite hitting 199, he was walking 18% of the time. So can he draw walks at a 16% clip with the elimination of the shift? That should help a Joey Gallo a bunch. So can he maybe add a lot of points to his average and get himself into a rhythm where maybe he still could hit you 30 home runs and get on base at a good clip? Honestly, offensively, as crazy as it is to say, Joey Gallo, in some respects, might be a better bet to be a solid offensive performer than Bellinger is, based on what we've seen the last couple of seasons. With that said, Bellinger is younger, and playing center field defense at an elite level is a lot better than Gallo and right. But these are two options the Mets had this offseason, where if Nimmo ends up signing elsewhere and your options begin to dwindle and you have to try to figure something out, where you could say, all right, we'll get one of these guys, and then you're going to hope that a Beatty breaks out, that an Alvarez breaks out, that a Vientos breaks out. You're hoping that your young talent starts to grab some of these other at-bats. And if one of these guys doesn't work, you always have that Jeff McNeil piece that if you need to slide him into right field and start a Louis Guillorme when you have Beatty at third, or if Escobar has to take some time at second base and McNeil shifts over, you can have that flexibility. I look at these guys in Gallo and Bellinger as first half, you're going to get great defense out of them, and you'll see what the offense looks like. And if they aren't up to snuff, that's the position you'd have to address come deadline. I like the fits on both of them, but it is interesting when I look at some of these other numbers with Gallo and the fact that he's only a year removed in 2021 from a decent season. Maybe I like him slightly more also because I think Gallo can really fall into your price range where you can sign Joey Gallo and Michael Brantley and pair those two guys together for maybe the same or just slightly more than a Bellinger or a Conforto could cost on their own because, Gallo really has a diminished market. And again, the Gallo-Brantley pairing is ambitious. And it might cost more than I'm giving it credit right now, but I think that's the type of thing that makes a lot of sense to raise the floor of this team and to just try to, use multiple players to replace the production that you got from a Brandon Nimmo in 2021. But next, there is, I think, maybe the more realistic option for a guy that, if healthy, could start for you in right field every day that you'd feel great about across the board, and that's Mitch Haniger and Michael Conforto. We'll get into more Haniger because we spent time with Conforto. We'll discuss them in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News & World Report, the third year in a row they took home that award. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get a priority police response. SimpliSafe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside, smarter ways to detect motion that alerts you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I would recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Again, simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, now getting into a couple of guys that I think could start out in right field for the Mets next season and be above average across the board, and that's Mitch Haniger and Michael Conforto. I think that before we get into their fit, one thing I'll say when it relates to Starling Marte, which we'll go a little bit more into depth with on tomorrow's show most likely, I would expect him to play center field next year. I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but when you think about what's out in the market, when you think about how much it would cost to trade for whatever center fielder you want to discuss, if that's Brian Reynolds or Cedric Mullins, I mean, these are guys that are going to cost a lot. Now, maybe you can get a Ramon Laureano from Oakland, and you can buy low on a guy and slot him into center field, but the trade market doesn't have a lot out there. The free agent market beyond Nimmo, it's Cody Bellinger, and then you're dropping off to Kevin Kiermaier. So Starling Marte, if you just said he was a free agent this offseason and you're trying to fill a hole in center field, he would be the best player available in free agency and the trade market. So you addressed it last offseason. You have the ability, if you had to put McNeil in right, but more importantly, you can find someone that can fill that position out in right field, and you can keep Canna in left. And, Haniger and Conforto are a couple of options. Conforto, we spent enough time on. I think he's a bounce-back candidate. He's comfortable in New York. But the difference between Haniger and Conforto is Haniger at least was healthy at the end of last season. He played 57 games. He hit 246, 308 on base, 429 slugging, did have 11 home runs in 247 plate appearances. A year before, he had a 100 RBI campaign where he had 39 home runs, really was a great player. 2021, a 121 WRC plus, a 2.5 F4 season. Conforto, to his credit, after a dreadful start that year, really came on strong and finished with, a 1.4 F4 and a WRC plus over 100, which was impressive considering how bad he started that year. I think that Haniger gives you a little bit more juice, a little more power, but he is right-handed, so you already have two righties in the outfield with Marte and with Canna. Do you want to have three righties across the board? It's a possibility. You could also DH Haniger, make him that right-handed complement to Vogelbach at DH. In those days where, you're facing off against a lefty, Haniger DHs, maybe you slide McNeil out into the outfield. There's a lot of ways you could kind of change up your lineup to fit a Mitch Haniger, but I think the one thing about him is that it just makes you very right-handed as a team. And the other thing is, you just have to weigh your injury risks, right? This is a guy at Haniger who has a worse injury history than a Michael Conforto, but his recent history is a little bit better. So you got to weigh those things out. It's almost similar to Carlos Rodon and Jacob deGrom, but even Rodon has shown more health of recent than Haniger, who just missed over 100 games in a season and has only played over 100 games twice in his entire career. Conforto had a little more of a track record of health, but then the shoulder injuries are a big concern. Is the power going to be there? When I look at these guys, it's not overly attractive, but I think they are really decent fallback plans, and because they're good fallback options, I'd prefer the homegrown, guy that's out there that you can just plug in and you feel that sense of comfort level. And I think the team would feel a lot of comfort in bringing him back into the mix, where he would go from his first tenure with the Mets, where he was supposed to be, if not the guy, one of the guys, to, sixth, seventh hitter in your lineup, who's just tasked with playing a good right field. And, just kind of filling the gaps that are left between Marte and Cannon and the three of them, I think makes sense. So that's where I'm at. Yes, you can comment. I've seen the comments. Another excuse that I had to talk about Michael Conforto, but he was a big part of this article. Again, top MLB free agents who can be had on 1-year deals. The rest of these guys that we're going to list here are all veterans. Defensively, none of them would help the Mets, really. But offensively, these are these mercenaries that you can have on a 1-year contract that could hit the ground running and actually be incredible contributors for you down the stretch, or really throughout the season. And you never know. You never know with these guys. So we're going to get into the veteran bats that might have a little bit left in the tank in just a minute. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Justin Verlander, if it doesn't sound like the Astros, right now you can bet on him to land with the Mets at plus 375 odds, land with the Yankees at plus 400, the Dodgers at plus 450. He has met with all of these teams, the Giants also in the mix at plus 500. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now getting to our last group of free agents, the veterans that have just enough left in the tank. We begin with Michael Brantley. Now, defensively, big concern about Michael Brantley fitting with Mark Hanna and Starling Marte. You can put him out in left field if you had to. You could DH him some. If you do have him in left, is Canna in right? I don't love that. Do you put Canna in center with Marte in right? I don't love that. So that's a big question mark. But offensively, if you want to get as close to the production that you are losing in Brandon Nimmo, you'll sign Michael Brantley. I mean, this is a guy over the last 5 seasons. He's hit 307, 367 on base, 465 slugging, a 127 WRC plus, on base percentage over 360 in each of those seasons. He's really good. And this past year, he actually walked more than he struck out, so the discipline's there. He's going to give you great at-bats the same way that Nimmo gave you great at-bats. And you could see a lineup where you have McNeil maybe batting first and Marte still in that 2-hole. And then you go Lindor, Alonso, Brantley. If you wanted to, he could be that protection where, yeah, if you want to walk Pete Alonso, fine, but that could push a runner into scoring position and Michael Brantley can go out and get a base hit. So I think Brantley would be a really nice fit. A shoulder injury at 35 is very concerning, but let's just say you were to sign Joey Gallo and Michael Brantley. You get those two guys. I would even say that would almost push Daniel Vogelbach to the point where you could consider getting rid of him, making a trade, sending him off to a different team where Brantley could be your DH, Gallo could be your right fielder, and if Gallo wasn't hitting, you could shuffle the outfield and figure things out another way. But, I mean, Michael Brantley is a better hitter than Daniel Vogelbach. That's for sure. It's just a matter of how the pieces fit, and I don't think that Brantley ends up on the Mets. I think that there's another team where he's going to fit in a little bit better, but this is more to illustrate how much I love him as a player. When I wrote this article, that was the veteran that I could see going to a team and having the biggest impact, whether that is returning to the Astros, if he ends up signing with the Yankees, if he signs, to any team really that's in contention. Even if he went to a team that is trying to contend for the first time in Texas and they overpay him, there's a lot that Brantley can still offer teams. And who knows, he might even still have a multi-year deal in him just based on how good he is when he's healthy. And he actually was healthy for a good part of his late career. It was just this past season that saw him knocked out for most of the rest of that campaign there. Brandon Belt. Now, not necessarily the best fit for the Mets unless you are replacing Daniel Vogelbach. But he's just worth noting from this article in that you look at 2020 and 2021, and we measure hitters based on WRC plus who had, at least 500 plate appearances. He was third in baseball behind Juan Soto and Bryce Harper with a 162 WRC plus. The guy was elite offensively those 2 years. Hit 37 homers, 23 doubles in 148 games played, accumulated a 5.4 F-WAR while being a below-average defender at first base. He could be a really good DH for a team. I know this year he had some regression, but he wasn't healthy. He felt good at the end of the season. That's a guy that a team's going to bet on, and he could possibly reward them if he's just a DH with 40 home runs and a 380 on-base percentage. He could be really good next year. Similar, let's stick with San Francisco. You have Evan Longoria. He signed that contract extension with the Rays. He really signed 2 contracts with them, but his last 6-year contract that was worth $100 million, that gave him essentially a 10-year deal when you paired it with his previous extension. So here's a guy that finally hits free agency for the first time in his career, and he's 37. But the thing about Longoria, last 2 seasons, 252 hitter, 333 on base, 466 slugging, 27 homers and 30 doubles in 170 games. The strikeout rate spiked this year, and I would be concerned about that if I was signing him, but you could see him doing what Albert Pujols just did with the Cardinals, maybe not to the same extent with that torrid stretch he had in the second half, but the complete version of what he put up first half and second half, a guy that could go out and maybe in a more limited role, stay healthy and post a 130 WRC plus when he doesn't have to play defense. I could see it with Longoria, and with the Mets, the fit actually does make a little bit of sense. If you were to hedge on McNeil having to play some right field and maybe having to slide Escobar to second a little bit, knowing that Beatty is still a question mark, and putting him as that right-handed complement, like he could fill in a lot of ways. He could back up Pete at first, he could back up Escobar and Beatty at third, and he could complement Vogelbach at DH. He makes a lot of sense for the Mets, actually. It's in a weird way. I don't think that one happens either. But I think that either him or Justin Turner could fit that type of role. Justin Turner would probably command a little bit more playing time. I imagine he ends up back with the Dodgers because he always does. But look at 9 seasons with the Dodgers, a 123 WRC plus, a 278 average the last 2 seasons for Justin Turner, 80 RBIs in each of those campaigns as well, or at least 80. It's amazing how good he's been for 9 years with the Dodgers. That he's going to be a Dodger Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest Dodgers ever. Nuts. I don't want the Mets to sign him, though, because we all know how that story ends. He signs with the Mets, and then his career's over. It'd just be awful, and then he'll retire. Last but not least on this list, I should have mentioned JD Martinez on yesterday's show when it comes to DHs. That is a mistake on my part. He's looking at Jose Abreu just got 3 years and the whatever it was, $58.5 million. And he's thinking, why can't I get 3 years as well? Because he's 35. He's coming off his 4th consecutive All-Star season, 2020. No one was an All-Star, but he was an All-Star in 2018, 2019, and then was again in 2021 and 2022. Played 139 games, so he stayed healthy, even though there was always reports that he was going through and playing through some pain. But, a 274 hitter, 341 on base, 448 slugging. Had the benefit of that green monster, so he was able to pepper it with doubles and had 40-plus 2-bag hits. So that's impressive. If the Mets just decided they needed some pop in their lineup, they needed to add something and just not a lot happened, I could see JD Martinez hanging around in free agency, similar to when he signed that last contract, late until February. And then maybe at that point you just say, all right, well, Scott Boras just sent out a mass email saying the first person that pays JD Martinez $16 million next season gets him. Obviously, it wouldn't be that simple, but that's how things could develop, where whoever can meet whatever price it is on a 1-year deal can get him. The Mets could do a lot worse than JD Martinez because he could be the full-time DH next season. Or he could, be in a platoon type role. So I think that's another option. Altogether, with all the players I mentioned today on 1-year deals, I think that I hate to just be a broken record on Conforto. I think he makes a lot. I think Conforto or Bellinger makes sense as a 1-player fix for a Nimmo replacement. I think Gallo and Brantley make sense as a two-person replacement for a Nimmo. And I think that any of those right-handers I mentioned, whether that's Longoria, whether that's JD Martinez, whether that's Justin Turner, or even to a lesser extent a Mitch Haniger, could make sense as far as that DH complement if you decide you need one. But again, if you listen to yesterday's show, the Mets might not have to address that position with the prospects they have in the pipeline that should be big contributors next season. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Tomorrow's show, all about Starling Marte. Make sure you follow, rate, and review so you can check that out. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in the sports world. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.